Broncos country, what is poppin'? Mile high salute, man. Hope you guys are having a wonderful evening. You've been hearing the term a lot about the Joker. I'm kind of sick about talking about it. Sean Payton referenced it, but that's just the name of the type of player that the Broncos are looking for. So we're going to dive into really the importance of that role. What does it mean? And what is Sean Payton's history, dating all the way back to New Orleans, back to 2006 when he started there? What does it mean to have the Joker, and how does it affect the offense and overall how good they look, and how far away are the Broncos from getting their guy, right? So we're gonna break that down. We're gonna dive into the data, a lot of it. So I hope this is all clear and concise and makes as much sense as possible. I'm not the best at Excel and all these spreadsheets, but put a lot of work into it, man. So hope you guys appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like the video. Appreciate that. If we can get to 1,000 subs before the draft, I will be a very, very happy person. So appreciate you guys and all of your wonderful, wonderful support. So let's dive into it, guys. Broncos, all you've been hearing about, as free agency looms, right? Less than a week away. They're talking about, okay, who's available at the receiver and at the tight end position and maybe even at running back that could potentially be the Joker. I think the Broncos have a much higher chance of finding that guy through the draft. But one thing that Broncos country should be very assured by is that Sean Payton does a really good job based off of his history of being able to find that difference maker, that person that can really dominate when it comes to his overall ability to, just be a game changer when it comes to, offensive weapons and in that quote unquote Joker role. So let me pull some of this up, and I got to add one really quick thing here before I do that. All right, here we go. All right, we are good to go. So I'll pop this off, I'll share the screen, and we'll break this all down. Hope it makes as much sense as I possibly can. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and we're going to roll. So I broke it down into a couple different eras, right? Obviously, the player names that you see here, these are the quote-unquote Joker guys, all right? And that's what I've deemed it. So in 2006, Sean Payton had the luxury of being able to draft a guy named Reggie Bush with the second overall pick. And in those years, they obviously had Marcus Colston, Joe Horn, a couple of those other guys playing. But, as a rookie, Reggie Bush had 88 catches and 565 rushing yards. So he was the guy that they really leaned on. And just to give you guys a little bit of comparison's sake, Marcus Colston was the leading receiver that year. He had 70 catches. Joe Horn was the second leading receiver. He had 49. So the leading receiver on the team in 2006 was Reggie Bush. And he kind of played into that Joker role throughout the early years for Sean Payton, right? I mean, he had a really good mix of being able to catch the ball, 47 plus catches every single year, 583 yards, got a lot of rushing yards too. I didn't put the rushing yards in there. I just put the receiving numbers. I have those, but he was really somebody that could be a difference maker, a little bit more of a mismatch guy. They did obviously have Jeremy Shockey at this time too, which I probably should have included, but there's a lot of that. And then when you look at those years, Marcus Colston had a 98 catch season, 84 catch season, 70 and 84 in those following years. So there was a lot of leaning on, Marcus Colston, the wide receiver one. And even in 07, Joe Horn had 94 catches for 1,300 yards. So you had two receivers that year that were just going bonkers in terms of the sheer number of targets that they were getting. So that's a little bit of that like anomaly different year, right? Was there a quote unquote Joker in, 07? No, there was not. But and it continued, actually really 07 and 08, it continued where the top two wide receivers were dominating all the targets, 31% target share between these two guys, Lance Moore and Marcus Colston, 42% target share the year before between Marcus Colston and Joe Horn. So, the ability to adjust there is huge. And then you introduce Jimmy Graham when it comes to the 2010 season. And that's when I kind of have, Bush and Graham were both on the team at the same time that year. And combined, they had 119 catches. And what you'll see is, they were much more heavily involved in the offense overall. And, Marcus Colston was still having a really big season, but they didn't really have so much of a reliance on their second wide receiver at that point because everything was reallocated. And that's when everything starts to change, right? You can see Marcus Colston's numbers for the following years are fairly consistent, still pretty good. The second wide receiver has some has some production as well. But what you'll really be able to see here is that Jimmy Graham really just took it over as that additional game changer, somebody that's really going to be able to help take that offense to the next level. 99 catches, 85 catches, 86 catches, and 85 catches. Consistent, unbelievable. And in those years, the Saints also happen to have their best offensive performances overall when it comes to points per game and as the total yards per game as well when you break it down. And that's not all by coincidence, right? They were able to implement somebody that was a game changer. Then there was a full gap here really with everybody. I mean, Michael Thomas wasn't on the scene at this point. In 2015, the leading wide receiver was still Marcus Colston, but Brandon Cooks really stepped up because Marcus Colston got injured that year. So it was really Brandon Cooks that they relied on a lot. They used Willie Snead out of the slot, still had the ability to show a lot of really good versatility and just saying, you know what, we're going to utilize the best guys that we have and try to make do, even with, our number one receiver, Marcus Colston, not playing the whole year. They had a really good year with Brandon Cooks and Willie Snead in those years, dispersing the targets between the two of them. Now, you see that there was a little bit of a dip, right, in terms of the overall points per game. Not too much from the Jimmy Graham years prior, but this was a weird year. Terrible run game when it comes to the Saints back then. But anyways, they had a little bit of a gap here. Then you really enter in Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas's era kind of went through these next several years where he was unbelievably dominant. But you have Michael Thomas there, and then he ended up finding Alvin Kamara. So just to give you guys an idea, I mean, in this, what is it, like a 15, 16-year stretch, you've got four different guys really be like the Joker or that true game changer, that somebody that brought a new kind of, level to the offense for what it's worth. And really just 1 year, you can say, in 2015 was the year where, things were kind of evenly distributed. There wasn't that full quote unquote Joker. In fact, you could probably make the argument that it was 2007 as well. So we can go ahead and kind of blank out that year as well. But of all of the years that he had in New Orleans, only 2 seasons he didn't have that quote unquote Joker or that game breaker type of a player. Anywhere else, he went out and he found them. And he didn't just find them. I mean, he did it in the draft, right? They drafted Reggie Bush, number 2 overall. They drafted Jimmy Graham. I think he was in the 3rd round. They drafted Michael Thomas in the 2nd round. They got Alvin Kamara in the 3rd round. So his ability to have an eye for talent and be able to find guys and bring them in and have a very specific role has been immaculate, to say the least. And it's really led to the Saints offenses consistently. I think they ranked in the top 10 in 8 or 9 of these years. Something like that. I have the data here, but everything, as you can see here, is a mess. But yeah, I mean, they were in the top 10 in all of these years from 2010 all the way to 2020. They were a top 10 offense. And so really impressive stuff overall when you talk about Sean Payton's ability. Now, he's in a little bit of a different situation with the Broncos, right? Because the Broncos currently, the problem is when he first took over, right, we were in a complete rebuild. We had no draft capital. We didn't really have that much money to be able to spend. We had that experimental year with Russ where they tried to figure some things out. They moved on. So I look at last year as really Sean Payton's first year of putting his imprint on this team. And you can tell there was a lot of experimenting, right? Trying out a lot of different backs, trying out some guys at receiver here and there. The tight ends were just kind of a non-factor. They basically gave up on that. And he really leaned into Courtland Sutton as much as he possibly could. But showing those, past years with the Saints, you can see just how much this team seems to lack talent still, right? Now, I get it. You got guys like Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims and Devon Vele, who are very young players that you feel optimistic about the development. But it's about bringing in guys that can truly be game changers. We have nobody that can do that at running back, and we've got nobody that can do that at the tight end position. And that's going to obviously be the key. So that's not breaking news. But when you think about, okay, who is it going to be? I look at a really good stopgap option that fits Sean Payton's system really well. He's not going to be a long-term solution, but at least you know what you're going to get. I think you can get a lot of production from him in 2025 if he can stay healthy, and that is Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones just makes a ton of sense. He projects very similarly to really all of the running backs that Sean Payton has enjoyed to use. I mean, dating back to Pierre Thomas, right, who is a a pretty, good pass catcher and a good runner overall, right? And then you have, Reggie Bush. We knew what he could do in the pass game and in the run game. And then you had Alvin Kamara, in those years as well. And the list goes on and on. There's quite a bit of others too in terms of, running backs. Deuce McAllister, right? Mark Ingram that he had mixed in as well. But what I'm really intrigued by with Aaron Jones is he's not going to be very expensive. You don't have to commit to him very long term, but he can come in and do exactly what Sean Payton's looking for. He can get open. He can make plays in the open field, especially in the pass game. He still has the pass catching prowess. And, if you need him to run between the tackles, he can certainly do that. Now, if you end up hitting a jackpot in the draft, right, it could be anybody. You can maybe Ashton Genty, maybe Omarion Hampton, maybe Travion Henderson, Caleb Johnson, any of those guys. That's amazing. That's a good thing. And what's nice about Aaron Jones is that he'll be able to complement anybody, right? You get a workhorse bell cow type of guy like a Caleb Johnson and Omarion Hampton or Genty. He can still have a really prominent role in, relieving those guys, being the third down back, pass protection, catching the ball out of the backfield. Great. If you get a guy like Travion Henderson, who honestly I comped to Aaron Jones, that'll be really good because they'll have a 1-2 punch. Henderson can bring out, some more juice, some more wiggle. He can learn from him. And both guys can still be super effective. Excuse me. And then, basically any of the backs that you bring, Aaron Jones is going to be a really good complement. And he can bring a lot more production out of that room than he needs to. In the tight end position, there's not really a lot of guys. I had a video a couple of days ago about Mike Gesicki. All the guys that are available in free agency are not like game-changing or like Pro Bowl level tight ends to say, but there's quite a bit of them that are significant improvements in terms of what it is that I feel like, what we had in 2024, to say the least. Some of my favorites, obviously, Mike Gesicki's at the top of the list. Juwan Johnson, someone that makes sense given the connection with Payton. And then I really like Tyler Conklin as well as an option. These are guys that can kind of just steady the ship. They can bring you some good, production in a room that's very, very much needed. And then, then you could talk about, okay, you look at the draft, right? Again, very deep in that position. Colston Loveland, he can be an absolute joker, right? Tyler Warren, he's the best tight end in this class. I really like Oronde Gadsden as somebody that I think can be a game changer in the pass game. Don't know how he is as a blocker, but former slot receiver, really good. Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor. I mean, it is a stacked class with some guys that I think Payton is really going to love. And it doesn't necessarily have to be any of the top guys in the first round. There's going to be a lot of others. But one thing that's been really nice to look at, and shout out to Zach Seegers for this on Twitter. We kind of had a little back and forth when I had said, it just seems like Sean Payton's offenses really heavily favor from the wide receiver standpoint. They heavily favor the wide receiver one. And then there's a significant drop off in terms of the wide receiver two. And while that's the case in a lot of years, overall, 19% of the target shares in Sean Payton's entire tenure in New Orleans, the wide receiver one got 19% of the target share. The wide receiver two got 12% of the target share. And that's just slightly above the league average in terms of like the differential. So Sean Payton has shown that he's a coach that he can adjust to his roster. He can make the necessary improvements. If he's got two stud wide receivers that are absolute game changers, then he's going to find a way to be able to utilize both of them. And that makes me feel a lot better because now we're not finding ourselves in a position where we have to go out there and find the joker tight end or the joker running back. We can have those positions come to us as they please. But in the first round, if somebody like a Michael Golden falls to us, whereas previously I thought, man, but what's the fit going to be like? You're really going to spend the number one, your first pick on a guy that you don't think is going to get that much production just because you don't think he's going to get a lot of targets. It's not necessarily true. We'll be able to find a way to get both guys involved, whether, it's Sutton and Golden or Golden and somebody else. Who knows? So I know it was a lot, guys. I appreciate y'all tuning in. I hope that was very insightful, but just know, Broncos country, that you guys are in good hands. Sean Payton knows what he's doing when it comes to offense. The guy can cook. I can promise you that. He balls out, and it's exciting, man. So appreciate y'all tuning in, man. Go Broncos as always. Y'all stay safe, and until next time, peace out, baby.